Hi, Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and I just decided to go impromptu. I've been following some news recently over the last month or two, really, about a couple of folks that are making some accusations in the direction of a major podcast network, and I thought I would just touch in here and share a little bit about what's going on. So the company in question is K with a Cast. I'm sorry, Cast with a K Media, that has been accused by a number of its podcast creators that they haven't been paid for advertising that's been run against their shows run on their shows, I should say, over the last some time. And Cast Media apparently is or has been sort of on the brink of bankruptcy and has sort of gone looking for some kind of a white knight to help them figure out the what and how to make things work. And I just thought that I would touch base a little bit about this and share my perspective on it, I guess you could say. I think, and again, I'm going. All of my information is secondhand. I'm basing it on media reports and YouTube's from the people involved and some other reporting on the subject. And as I understand it, what's gone on is that Cast Media, in order to build up its stable of shows, its stable of celebrity hosted podcasts, they went out and they offered a number of creators what are called minimum guarantees. And that is basically a typical deal for advertising and for a network with a podcast. At least one of the typical approaches is a revenue share where you bring us your show and we will do our ad sales and we will split the revenue from those ads according to some formula. And that's great. But high profile celebrity or creators with a big audience and stuff, they're in a position to command um, upfront money. And that upfront money can take a couple of different forms. Oftentimes it's called an advance, where it's essentially a loan against the future income that you would be generating from your show, and that those ad revenues would add up to. And in some instances, it's characterized as what's called a minimum guarantee. And a minimum guarantee is just that. It's just a promise that, hey, you're going to receive this much money, at least this much money, every time, every cycle, whatever that is. And apparently, what Cast had been doing was promising monthly guarantees. So the hosts would be receiving a minimum payment every month for delivering their shows. And that would be great. And that would be probably treated as an advance against the revenues from those shows. But when the show exceeds the amount of the minimum guarantee, then then the network is responsible for paying up whatever the difference is. Okay, that's great. Sounds nice. And it's fantastic when the company that's making the guarantees is properly and well capitalized. That is, that it has enough money in the bank or enough income that it's confidently going to be able to generate enough to pay off continue paying those guarantees. And sometimes it's a little bit of a guess or a little bit of a hedge that the enough income will come in from the big successful shows that the guarantees for some of the shows that aren't maybe performing as well, will cover things and so on. But apparently, Cast Media got in a little bit over it, well, maybe a lot over its head, and was paying out more in guarantees than it could sustain from its income. And yet they continued apparently to bring on new shows and make more guarantees to more creators and so on. And pretty soon, the creators who had come in early in the game were not getting the revenue that their shows that they should have been receiving from the ads on their shows. And so they started to complain and they started to rattle sabers and so on and so forth. And, it was a little bit of Cast apparently, to use the expression, having to rob Peter to pay Paul, sort of, pull from here to make things happen. And they're paying out advances from revenues that are coming in from other shows or those guarantees, I should say, from revenues coming in from other shows. And it sort of became a house of cards. I don't believe that at the outset it was intended to be a scheme to do that, but it's what happened. And apparently there have been some accusations and finger pointing about the people at the top of Cast Media perhaps lining their own pockets, perhaps purchasing real estate with funds that should have maybe gone to other people at the company or to the podcasters. Certainly the people who run companies are entitled to get a salary for doing their work and running their companies. But if that salary is disproportionate to what they're paying out to all the people working for them, then there may be some issues and some problems. So that's what we're dealing with Cast Media and a number of these podcasters. And I will mention a couple of the shows just so you know. Jim Cornette and Brian Last have a show. They allege that the company, that they haven't been paid for the ads sold on their show for some time. And apparently Cast Media has been acquired by, I'm seeing different conflicting messages. Apparently someone said Live One is taking over, is buying up Cast Media. That's the White Knight. Another report I heard called it Podcast One, which is a very different company. And apparently they've basically offered to rescue Cast Media by paying off these podcasters out there that are owed a lot of money. It adds up to about $4 million. They have offered to pay a third of the money when the deal closes, and another third over a period of time, and then another third in stock. But the problem is that stock may or may not turn out to have any real value. So these creators are really concerned that if Cast does go bankrupt, they get nothing. And if they don't accept this deal, they're going to probably get nothing. And if they do accept this deal, then they're going to end up with something less than the full value that they're owed. And they're not okay with that. So can't say that I blame them. I think that's a valid point of concern for them. And there you go. Well, meanwhile, folks at Cast, the sales team, apparently a lot of them, if not all, have left the company. And in fact, it's been reported that many of them are out looking for other jobs. The company's chief business officer apparently launched his own podcast network and is no longer handling things at Cast, and in fact has taken some shows from Cast over to his new network. Other shows have seemed to have dropped Cast's logo from their artwork and things like that, shifted their hosting around and those kinds of things. And meanwhile, the head of Cast Media has been rattling sabers about suing people for libel because their accusations are false and so on. One report that I saw over the weekend talked about that person's real estate in being wrapped up in some kind of a corporate shelter of some sort, the purposes of which are kind of open to interpretation. Anyway, so there's a lot of smoke being blown from all directions right now about this, but suffice it to say that this business of paying out minimum guarantees seems to have come and bitten Cast in the behind a bit, and now they kind of need a rescue. So we'll see. I don't think there's been any criminal charges or suggestion of criminal activity, but it wouldn't surprise me if someone pushed for an investigation. Whether or not the authorities will care enough about it, it's a large amount of money to podcasters. It's a relatively small amount of money in the scheme of things that regulators and lawmakers and prosecutors and folks like that would take big notice of. So we will have to wait and see what happens there. But this is not a new scenario. Advances and minimum guarantees are very common throughout the entertainment industry. But I guess what I would say is, if you are a podcaster and you are looking at joining a network and you are in the enviable position of being able to ask for and receive some kind of minimum guarantees, make sure you and your lawyer do some due diligence and identify where's this money going to come from, and is the company capitalized in a way that it'll still be there and that the revenues will still be there to support paying these guarantees. And maybe it's also an argument that in the scheme of things, we ought to be a little more just cautious generally going into these kinds of a deal. Now, one other thing I will say is that if you are in a situation where you are not getting paid, and I've seen this recently with a couple of film distribution companies, I've seen it recently with a couple of other kinds of businesses outside the podcasting space. If you get into a situation where the company that is supposed to be collecting your money for you and distributing your share to you and those kinds of things isn't doing that, if the money stops flowing, don't wait too long to do something about it. Everybody wants to be everybody's friends. I get it. You don't want to make waves. You don't want to rock the boat. And yeah, companies sometimes have a blip or they change accounting methods or something, and that affects things for a week or two or something like that. But if you get to a point where you're owed money and it's beyond 30 days and you're not getting answers to what's going on, or the answers don't sound realistic or true to you, that's when it's time to call your lawyers in and really start doing the prep work to make sure you're not found in a position of having to make this sort of Hobson's choice between fewer dollars, a percentage of the money rather than the whole amount that's owed you, or taking your chances that the company will survive or go bankrupt or those kinds of things. Most contracts have what we call a notice and cure provision in it that says you notify them that they're in breach of contract. If they don't cure it within a certain amount of time, then the contract terminates and you get your rights back and you get all these other things, and they still owe you the money they owe you, but you're not in a weird position of having to sort of wait and hope and so on. Like I said, with some of these film producer clients of mine, I'm seeing the distribution companies, they'll pay out a little bit, dribs and drabs, to just sort of keep you on the string. And the fact is, if it's gonna happen once, then there's no, immediate big news that there's been a buyout or a takeover or something like that. I think you need to pull the trigger on that termination. It's hard to swallow, and it puts you back in that position of not having distribution or not having a network for your show. But I think personally, I would rather be on the outside looking in while one of these companies collapses or something than inside hoping it doesn't and watching it collapse around me, and still not having the money and also not being able to get out, because once that bankruptcy procedure starts, there's a good chance you won't be able to terminate the contract. The bankruptcy puts a stay on all kinds of legal proceedings. So if there's a threat, if you're suspicious that a company you're working with is likely to be going bankrupt, get out before that happens. Terminate the contract before that happens, if that's at all possible, because otherwise you may just be in for a loss. And that's all I have to say on the subject. If you're getting into deals, these are sophisticated contracts. You're dealing with companies that are sophisticated on the other side. Be sure you have representation. Be sure you have someone like myself. It doesn't have to be me, but someone who knows this stuff and gets it. Have them on your side in the negotiations. It is worth the investment in getting some representation and counsel. So you have those rights of termination and those notice and cure periods and things like that, and keeping them short and keeping things as favorable to you as possible. So that's going to be it. I don't have much else to say. I just wanted to share some thoughts on this particular situation with Kast Media. And I'll be the first to say I don't have all the facts, obviously. Until there's someone litigating this thing, those facts are going to, the sides are holding on to their cards pretty tightly. Some are talking about the others a little bit, but, there's always going to be another side to the story. So if anybody from any of these parties wants to talk to me and share a little bit more, we can clear the air a little bit. I'm open to that. Reach out to me and let me know. And maybe there'll be more on the story coming soon. But don't wait around. Don't sit on your hands if someone owes you money and isn't paying. You want to be a good person. You want to be kind and respectful, that they're dealing with some stuff. On the other hand, so are you. And your financial and your economic interests and your business interests do have to come first. So if you're going to be a legit pro and you're going to work with people who are legit pros, then everybody needs to act like it. And that means getting representation. It means having your team assembled, and it means getting things in writing the right way and protecting your legal interests so you don't find yourself winding up holding the bag and it turning out to be empty. All right, that's going to be it for me today. I just wanted to touch base and bring that up to your attention, and I'll see you again next time. Take care. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and tune in on Thursday for the next official episode of Legit Podcast Pro, my live stream and podcast where I talk about legal issues in this space. Have a great day. Take care.